I lived in a small town. It was 2,000 people in Canada. Little river that went through it, and we swam in a lot of water around. Niagara Falls was about 4 or 5 miles away, the Niagara Falls. And so, I've always sort of loved the water, possibly as a result of that, and that's manifested itself, obviously, in my work. I look back at who I was at 10 years old or 9 years old, and I'm the same person now. In essence, wanting to build things and wanting to get a lot of people together and do some grandiose thing, whether it was build a fort or a tree house or an airplane. Once we built an airplane, not intending it to fly, just hang from a tree, but that sort of thing. And I realize I'm just doing the same thing now, just getting a bunch of kids to help me build a fort, except that now it takes $100 million, and the kids are all my age. My biology teacher was our muse at that time, and I think the fact that we were having to do everything, that it wasn't handed to us, may have created a kind of a work ethic that paid off then in independent film production, because it's the same thing. You're finding scraps and bits and pieces and putting it all together and putting on a show. And it's that sense of being able to create some moment of glory, some showmanship out of nothing, out of baling wire, that is maybe the lesson that was learned there as a result of this man who just decided to have a theater arts program. I was more like the kind of the misfit, the outsider, and of course the misfits and the outsiders all collect together like this kind of pond scum around the sides, and that's where all the I think the good ideas come from. I certainly never thought of myself as superior or gifted in any way, just different, definitely different, and satisfied to be different. Maybe not always happy to be different, but satisfied to be different. If you don't have the ability to make that leap of faith, it's going to be harder for you to accomplish something great, because there are going to be moments, there are going to be little windows of opportunity that open for a split second, and you either squirt through or you don't. But at the moment that you do that, you have to have prepared yourself. You have to have prepared yourself for that fight, because that's going to be the fight of your life. Whatever that opportunity is, when you grab it, it's going to be more energy than you can manage. It's going to be grabbing the tiger by the tail. And if you have not prepared yourself mentally for it, through study, through knowing and hypothesizing what it will be like when you're in that position, you won't be able to deal with it. And half of what you've concluded before the fact in your theoretical projections is going to be wrong, but half of it will be right, and that's the part you're going to prevail with. What finally attracted me to film in such a definitive way was it was the only place I could reconcile the need to tell stories and to work in a visual art medium and the desire to understand things at a technological level, and my fascination with engineering and technology. I watched a couple of really bad directors work, and I saw how they completely botched it up and missed the visual opportunities of the scene when we had put things in front of them as opportunities, set pieces, props, and so on, and they had these great actors to work with, and they just blew it. And there was a moment where I said, I may not be very good at this, but I know I'm better than that guy. And that was kind of a critical moment, because when you realize that you can at least be better than somebody else who's already doing it, then you can visualize yourself doing the job. There were several light bulbs at several different times, and the first one was when I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey for the first time. And the light bulb there was, a movie can be more than just telling a story. It can be a piece of art. It can be something that has a profound impact on your imagination, on your appreciation of how music works with the images and so on. It sort of just blew the doors off the whole thing for me, and at the age of 14, and I started thinking about film in a completely different way and got fascinated by it. The next light bulb was really just the one that says, just do it. Just pick up a camera and start shooting something. Don't wait to be asked, because nobody's going to ask you. And don't wait for the perfect conditions, because they'll never be perfect. It's a little bit like having a child. If you wait until the right time to have a child, you'll die childless. And I think filmmaking is very much the same thing. You just have to take the plunge and just start shooting something. Even if it's bad, you can always hide it, but you will have learned something, you know. I was living in a Star Wars world in my mind, and all of a sudden I saw this film, and it was like somebody had reached into my hindbrain and yanked out a lot of stuff that was in there, and I was seeing it on the screen, realized. And not to take anything away from George's creation, because it's obviously a phenomenal milestone, but my reaction to it was not, oh wow, that's cool, I want to see more. It was, oh wow, I better get off my butt because somebody's doing this stuff, and it you know, and they're beating me to it. That was my reaction. So I basically quit my job and started doing a little film with visual effects, and sucked my friends into that vortex, and we all quit our jobs, and fortunately we've all managed to successfully transition into filmmaking of that little group of 4 people. A lot of people ask me, what's the best advice to someone who wants to be a director? And the answer I give is very simple. Be a director. Pick up a camera, shoot something, no matter how small, no matter how cheesy, no matter whether your friends and your sister star in it. Put your name on it as director. Now you're a director. Everything after that, you're just negotiating your budget and your fee. So it's a state of mind, is really the point. Once you commit yourself to do it, I would say that my father was completely unsupportive in any way, shape, or form, and was really sort of just sharpening his knives, waiting for me to fail so that he could say, aha, I was right, you should have gone into engineering. And it was always this sort of attitude of, well, one of these days you'll get a real job, this film thing, will pass as a fad. And so there was zero support there. And I actually think that it made me angry enough that I had to succeed. I think if I had a soft, rosy, supportive kind of, it's good if you do it, but if it doesn't work out sort of thing, it would have been different. But it kind of made me mad, and I had to prove that I was right, that this was the right thing to be doing. And I think it made me mad enough to get good. Growing up in the 60s, coming to my kind of intellectual awakening in high school, at a time when the world was in complete chaos between the war in Vietnam and civil rights and all of the upheavals, all the social upheavals, free love, everything that was happening in the late 60s. It gave one an interesting perspective, being a science fiction fan and looking at a world that was coming apart and thinking in very apocalyptic terms about that world. And I've never lost that sort of almost a fascination with apocalyptic themes, and Titanic is just another manifestation of that, because for me that film was just a microcosm for the way the world ends. However it ends, we don't know, but if it ends by the human hand, it'll end in the way that Titanic ended, which is through some casual, simple carelessness. So being a child of the 60s in that way, I think very much influenced the way I looked at what could be done with film. You never really get an opportunity. You take an opportunity. In the filmmaking business, no one ever gives you anything. Nobody ever taps you on the shoulder and say, I've really admired the way you talk and the way you draw. I think you'd make a good director. It doesn't happen that way. You have to constantly be pulling on somebody's sleeve, saying, hey, I want to direct, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices to do that. The mistake a lot of people, I think, make in Hollywood is that they think, well, I'll get to the top of my field as a whatever, editor, production designer, writer, and then I'll just move laterally into directing, and I'll be more respected, and I'll have more power. It doesn't work that way, because you drop right to the bottom of the pack as a director. The way I did it was I came in through production design, which is good because you're thinking visually, and you're very aware of the director's problems in trying to tell a story, and how the environment is a manifestation of the narrative in some way. And I sort of proved myself as a production designer in the scrappy, stay up all night for 15 days in a row kind of independent filmmaking that was done at Roger Corman's place. This was in the early '80s, and when they see that you have the creativity and the stamina and that you basically understand filmmaking, it's not a ridiculous leap in that environment to say, I now want to try my hand. I want to direct. I just basically went up to Roger one day and said I'd like to direct second unit on the film that we were making at the time, which was a low-budget science fiction horror picture. And he gave me a camera and two or three people, and we started a little second unit, and the second unit basically became this steamroller that wound up shooting about a third of the picture because they were falling way behind on first unit. So they'd give me the actors and say, well, do scene 28 and scene 42, and all of a sudden I was working with actors, and that was terrifying because I hadn't really thought that part through yet, that in order to direct you have to work with actors. It's not just about sets and visual effects. And so it was simultaneously a shock and a joyful discovery, because I found that all actors really want is some sense of what a writer can bring to the moment, some sense of a narrative purpose. What am I doing? What am I trying to do here? What's the scene about? And it's really pretty much that simple. So that was the next epiphany, if you will, which is this part of it is fun too. It took me a long time to realize that you have to have a bit of an interlanguage with actors. You have to give them something that they can act with. You can't tell them a lot of abstract information about how their character is going to pay off in this big narrative ellipse that happens in scene 80. That doesn't help them. They're in a room. They have to create an emotional truth in a moment, and they have to be able to create that very quickly. So they need real tangible stuff, and that's a learned art, I think. But coming from writing and understanding what they're feeling and what they're thinking, what the character's feeling and thinking, and having thought about that a lot for months in advance is the way that I get enough respect from the actors that they trust what I'm saying, they trust what I'm giving them to do. Never give up, because it's going to be unbelievably hard. It's going to be a ridiculously brutal uphill fight all the time, and you just have to have tremendous stamina and self-confidence to power through it. You have to not listen to the naysayers, because there will be many, and often they'll be much more qualified than you and cause you to sort of doubt yourself. But what I learned from those early days was to trust my instincts and to not back off, because when the hour gets dark, your instinct is to, or your tendency might be to say, well, this is just too hard, and nobody should have to go through this in order to accomplish X, whether it's a movie or whatever. But in the pursuit of excellence, and I think you can be in the pursuit of excellence when you're working on a low-budget science fiction horror film. If it's how you define it, you have to go all the way. It's that simple. Now, I don't mean trample over people. I don't mean turn into a screaming maniac. I mean you have to have made that commitment within yourself to do whatever it takes to get the job done, and to try to inspire other people to do it. Because obviously the first rule is you can't do it all yourself. I had to learn to inspire people to give me their best work. And I also had to learn to accept what they brought, even if it was either A, not as good, or B, good but just different from what I had imagined, and say that the end result of our collective efforts will be exactly that. It'll be all of our efforts together. It won't ever be exactly the way I imagined it. And that's I think an important lesson as well, is that in any group enterprise, it's going to be the sum total of the group. So choose your group well, and go in with that little voice in the back of your mind that says, be zen about it, be philosophical. It's ultimately going to be the best that these people can do. Everyone around me had basically said, you stink, you suck, you don't know what you're doing. And I accepted it, but then a little voice kept saying, I don't think so. I don't think it could be that bad. I remember doing some pretty cool stuff with the actors in this moment and that moment, and I looked at it and it was fine. So then I thought, you know what, I actually can do this, and I just fell in with a pack of thieves and wackos here. But I also realized that I was going to have to get busy and create my own thing, that nobody would hire me after that experience. Nobody would hire me and just put me on a film. I'd have to create my own thing and hang on tenaciously to that in order to be able to direct again, and that's why I wrote The Terminator. Ultimately, you reach a point where people will hire you because you have the strength, or some people call it vision. That's a bit of a lofty word, because I don't think it's something that comes to you necessarily in the night. I think it's something that's the process of a very rigorous mental processing of the data on a day-by-day basis, and the possibilities, what you can do and what you can't do. And over time, people will realize that you have what it takes to be in that situation where nobody really knows the answer, although a lot of them think they do or say they do. And you've come up with the right formula. And to have come out of these battle situations a number of times with the right formula on a consistent basis, they tend to trust you more as you go along. They'll never trust you completely. When you're on a set, the creative process consists of, oh my God, how are we going to do that? You're going to have to move the wall back 3 feet, and then you're going to have to pile up some boxes over here and put the camera on it. It's all nuts and bolts things, and then you have to be able to switch that off in a heartbeat and think about what's the actor feeling, what's the character feeling at that moment, and it might be some really important, very pivotal scene for them. And I think a lot about of what is misunderstood about my particular filmmaking process is that I get people to go that extra mile that they've never done before, and they go into new territory. They go beyond what they previously thought were their limits, and then afterwards they talk about it like it was a big adventure. Oh man, we worked around the clock, and we all almost died, and it sounds like an indictment of the production as a bunch of wackos, but when in fact they're actually they want to share the fact that they did this, that they did go beyond. They went beyond in their creative capacity as well, and that's why they always all come back and want to do it again. Maybe just not right away. There's a tremendous temptation to do a workaround, or to do a moral or ethical workaround or shortcut in a lot of situations, because it's easier, and it's just you're so needy to get those little breaks and so on. And I think a lot of people get sort of ethically short-circuited at that stage, and they never recover. Because I think a lot of people would say, well, I'll do what I have to do now, but then later I'll be good. It doesn't work that way. You are who you are, and fortunately, I've managed to get where I am with the occasional burglary aside, without having to really hurt anybody or go against my word. I think ultimately your word becomes the most important thing that you have. It's the most important currency that you have. Having a successful film is very important currency as well, but in the long run, your word is the most important thing. And if you say you're going to do something, you have to do it. Titanic was in some ways the roughest project that I've ever been involved with, and what saw me through on that was that I had a relationship with the people who were quite rightly panicking, but they never completely panicked because they knew who I was, and we always treated each other with a kind of a respect, and I always did what I think was the right or ethical thing throughout that, even though it was costing me millions of dollars personally, right out of my pocket. To do it, I felt I had to do it, or they would never trust me again on another film. And I think that's ultimately the most important currency that you reap from any situation. Titanic was a situation where I felt, I think, pretty much like the officer felt on the bridge of the ship. I could see the iceberg coming far away. But as hard as I turned that wheel, there was just too much mass, too much inertia, and there was nothing I could do. But I still had to play it through. There was no way to get off. And so then, you're in this kind of situation where you feel quite doomed, and yet you still have to play by your own ethical standards, no matter where it takes you, And ultimately, that was the salvation, because I think if I hadn't done that, they might have panicked, they might have pulled the plug, things might have been very different, the whole thing might have crashed and burned, but it didn't. we held on. We missed the iceberg by that much. I think that it was definitely a goal of Titanic to integrate a very personal, very emotional, and very intimate filmmaking style with spectacle, and try to make that not be kind of chocolate syrup on a cheeseburger, make it somehow work together. The thing that is exciting about filmmaking is to think back to the moment in time right before you had the idea, and think about that at the moment that you're sitting or standing on the set, and there are thousands of people around, and they've built this huge set, and there are all these actors, and there's all this energy and all this focus, and realize that it's all in the service of something that was made up out of whole cloth. That's fun. That's what an architect must feel like when they drive down the street and they look up and see a building that they designed. It's something that you imagined made tangible. I know what I've tried to do, which is tell stories that excite the imagination, and maybe say something at a thematic level, maybe something about the human condition with respect to our human relationship with technology, because ultimately I think all my stories have been about that to one degree or another, and to allow people to step through that screen into that world, whatever it is, whether it's the world of the Abyss or the world of the Terminator or Titanic, to let people live in that, create that space for them, and let them live in the shoes of those characters for a while. That's what I set out to do. I think it's really up to others to sort of sort it out, what it ultimately means. I just like to do it full bore. For me, it's not about being comfortable. I want to be in there. I want to help the guys move the dolly. I'm at my best when I'm neck deep in ice water, trying to work out how we're going to, keep the lights turned on when the water hits the bulbs. The more the challenge is, the more I enjoy it, and the more I can lead other people into these situations where they all think they're going to die, the more fun I'm having. So needless to say, we have a few washouts. We have a few people that don't like my version of day camp. But I would say that 80 or 90% of them feel like they've been through something. They've done the best that they've done in their professional careers, and they're usually pretty eager to re-up for another one. As a Canadian, the American dream had a very negative and pejorative connotation when I was growing up, because it was this kind of cultural imperialism. I grew up in a border town on the other side of the border in Niagara Falls, Canada, and but since I moved to the United States at the age of 17, I actually feel very much like I'm probably in my basic genetic nature much more American than Canadian, because I really believe in a lot of I believe strongly in a lot of the traditional values of this country, in terms of respecting individuals' rights, the rights to the freedom of speech, and a lot of the things that are in the basic fabric of this country. Americans and Canadians, even to a large extent, they come from frontiersman stock. So they're people who hewed their civilization out of the wilderness. It wasn't given to them. It's not like people growing up in Italy or France in the shadow of past glories from thousands of years before. We made what we have, and we don't have a great cultural depth like they do, but what we have is ours by God. And I like that. I like that about it. It sort of puts your hand on the tiller of destiny in a way, and America definitely has its hand on the tiller of destiny for this planet. For good or bad doesn't mean you know what you're doing necessarily.